In this episode, I'll be reviewing the book My Cousin Maria Schneider, a memoir by Vanessa Schneider. It was translated from French by Molly Ringwald. Welcome to Robert Bellissimo at the Movies. This is a YouTube video podcast where we explore storytelling on film as well as interviews with industry professionals who work in film, television, theater, among other areas of the arts. And from time to time, I review books, books on film, books on actors, directors, screenwriters, and so on and so forth. And today, I'll be reviewing this book that I really enjoyed called My Cousin Maria Schneider, all about Maria Schneider, the actor who people will know from Last Tango in Paris and The Passenger. So this was a tough read in a lot of ways because she had a rough life, a very difficult childhood. She didn't grow up with her father. Her father was actually a movie star, Daniel Guillen. Her parents weren't together. Her mother was actually a teenager by the time she became a parent, and actually so Maria Schneider's grandmother was also a teenager when she became a parent. So she didn't have people who really knew, who had the maturity to take care of her. And for example, her mother would be having sex with a man and call out to Maria to go and get her vibrator. I mean, just things that are totally beyond inappropriate. So she had this very difficult relationship with her mother. So she often actually stayed with her uncle and aunt, and they were very involved in left-wing politics, if not far left-wing politics. And her uncle actually, he was amongst a lot of different circles, and one of them was actors that he knew. And that, of course, is how Maria came to meet Alain Delon through her uncle, and Delon took a real liking to her. And actually, at the beginning of the book begins with her funeral, and Delon was at the funeral and gave a speech, and they had a real connection, and he helped her get a part in a film he did called Madly, which was released in 1970. She also got to know Brigitte Bardot very well, and they lived together. Brigitte Bardot helped her throughout her life, and actually Brigitte Bardot was almost like a mother figure to her. You see towards the end of the book, Vanessa, who wrote the book, her cousin, became a journalist, and she met Brigitte Bardot's husband. And Brigitte Bardot is not someone that you can reach very easily or does interviews and stuff like that. And she was on the phone. Her husband was on the phone with Brigitte Bardot and mentioned, "Oh, I'm with Maria Schneider's cousin, Vanessa." This is after Maria Schneider died in 2011, and she asked immediately if she agreed to talk to her on the phone, just like that. And so there are some really interesting anecdotes about her relationships with people that I didn't know that she was very close with, like Delon and Brigitte Bardot, these icons. And so that's really how she got her foot in the door with film in the film world. And so from there, this is how Last Tango in Paris came to be, because Bertolucci spotted her in a photo with Dominique Sanda, who is one of the leads in The Conformist, the great Bertolucci film. He was doing Last Tango in Paris, and so he actually originally wanted Jean-Louis Trintignant and Dominique Sanda, who were the leads in The Conformist, which then turned out to get to Brando. And then he saw something in Maria Schneider that he felt was right to her, for this part. And so she gets into Last Tango in Paris, and of course this is the beginning of her deep troubles. And Bertolucci was not very nice to her. He was cruel towards her. It was a grueling shoot. And of course, as we all have come to know, which she talks about in the book, particularly in the last 7 years or so, people have now found out that the butter scene where Paul, who Brando plays, rapes Maria's Jean the rape scene where he uses butter as a lubricant, that she didn't consent to the use of butter. And right after they shot this, she, and I don't blame her, started screaming at Brando and Bertolucci, and really broke down. And this was traumatic for her, and I could totally understand why. And as we've come to learn, he did this interview, Bertolucci, 10 years ago, which in 2016 really came to light, where he expressed guilt about the situation, but that he wanted a reaction from her, not as an actress, but from making of, and I'm not quoting him directly, but making it so real that he would get a true reaction. And there have been directors throughout history who have manipulated actors to get certain performances, and it's not a creative way to do it. And as we've come to learn, particularly since the Me Too movement, of these things happening, of directors, using real methods to get certain responses, these lead to trauma and some severe problems. And after that, it became like the butt of a joke. This butter. She'd be on an airplane, and someone would hand her butter, like the steward or stewardess. There'd be butter on her plate. So it was a traumatic experience, and apparently even Brando felt manipulated by Bertolucci, and had experienced trauma as a result. They, years later, apparently worked through their issues. Brando wouldn't talk to him for a long time. But but as Vanessa in the book says, perhaps there likely was less to forgive from Brando's side, and she apparently ran into him years later at a somewhere in Japan, I believe, or at a film festival, at a movie screening, and someone apparently introduced them. Not real. I don't know why this person didn't realize that they worked together on Last Tango. And Maria apparently just looked at him and said, "I don't know this man," and walked away. So I can't say I blame her at all for her resentment towards Bertolucci, because this led to so many problems for her. And then the reaction of the film was so strong, both positive and negative, and she was attacked on the street for it. But at the same time was praised for it. But here's someone who wasn't even 20 at this point. And so she, throughout the 70s, had a lot of problems. I don't know if everything was directly related to Last Tango in Paris, because she became a heroin addict, and drug addiction, alcoholism, suicide. These things actually ran in her family. Like, a lot of people in her family had these kind of struggles as well. So whether her problems were totally from Last Tango or from her, very troubled upbringing, one doesn't know. But some of those things are really hard to read. Like Vanessa would say, she would witness her waking up, her cousin Maria waking up and scratching herself, almost as if ants were all over her body. And so this was a real struggle, and it is hard to read. I mean, it's disturbing to read the realities of this heroin addiction. And her uncle, Vanessa's father, sometimes would make her look at herself in the mirror and say, "Look at what you're doing to yourself." And so she really struggled, but apparently she had a life partner, this woman that she spent the rest of her life with, and actually helped her to get clean. And my impression was that she really saved her life in a lot of ways. And she had relapsed on occasion, but apparently was able to conquer drug addiction and went clean from the help of her partner. So that was great to hear. But it's interesting because she was in a number of films. I mean, there's 58 credits, I believe, or close to 60. And, as much as she would talk about how the industry destroyed her, there was a sense I got that she was proud of her accomplishments. And actually, later in her life, she received an award, a very high honor in France for her work and her contribution to the arts that she was very, very proud of. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that, oh yeah, everything's everything's okay, but it was a relief from the reader's point, and my point of view, that it wasn't just so bleak, even though there was a lot of trouble that came from the industry. People after Last Tango, she was the nude, she was naked in it, and that's people then producers, it's male dominated, right? And that's the kind of roles they wanted to see her in, and so this was, that's hard for anyone at that age. It was traumatic, and so it's sad to read, but her cousin who wrote the book, who became a journalist, Vanessa, really always felt a connection with her, really admired her. And they were actually going to write this book together before Maria died. And then as they started working on it, Maria could not bring herself to do it, could not face it. And so Vanessa thought, she was going to do it herself after she passed. And so it's quite touching. I mean, they had a real deep affection and connection towards each other. She talks about saving everything that was written about her in magazines or newspapers in this red binder, and that she would reread it constantly. And then one day it went missing. But she really admired her and watched her struggle. And there's even these, stories of even after Maria died, because her parents weren't ever married, so she had half siblings. And so she met her half sister years later, who she had never met before, and really interesting story there about, she was going to write this book, so she's trying to find out more about her. And, it's just sort of the research she put into it, even though she was her cousin, to talk to different people who knew her. I found that, as someone who really loves doing research, and I mean, I'm not a journalist, but I guess I do things that journalists do. I just thought how she was trying to learn more about her cousin to be touching and to be interesting for her, because this is a family member. This is her cousin, so it's really about her as well, and it's also their story. It's not just her saying, oh, this happened and then this happened to my cousin, and so on and so forth. It's their story, and how even her cousin was reacting to these events over the years, and stuff like that. And I love that she writes the book, she writes it as though the whole book is her talking to Maria. Like, she goes like, when you did this, and when you said that, and when we did this, and so on and so forth. So it just felt so personal to me, and subjective. I just thought it was really, really well done, really well written. She did really like Italian film. She loved Antonioni, and she then, of course, was in The Passenger, which also starred Jack Nicholson. She would comment on the fact that these love interests to her were always these much older men. Brando, she said at least Nicholson was younger than Brando, but still, he's like 13 or 14 years older than she was. And of course, it's always the case with film, particularly Hollywood. I mean, and this is Europe, so even Europe, an Italian film where men with these much younger women. And so she talked about how she didn't like things like that. But she did talk about how The Passenger was her favorite film. She did apparently really like Jacques Rivette, and she was in a film with him called Merry-Go-Round. That was also with Joe, that he directed, and was also with Joe Dallesandro, because she said that Rivette didn't objectify actors like Bertolucci did to her. One thing that, she talked about how the film industry destroyed her career, and other people thought it was, it wasn't just the film industry, it was her drug addiction. And her cousin had a different possible perspective, was that acting just really wasn't for her. This was just her opinion. But then she later said, well, it was almost like she was just meant to act. She was just born to do it. Like, what else could she do? Not that she didn't necessarily have other talents, but it was just something that, this was just my opinion from what Vanessa was writing, that Vanessa just felt like this is just what she was born to do. It was also interesting to note, just, circling back to Brando, that she did keep in touch with Brando for a number of years, even though she held some blame towards him as well, particularly in the butter sequence. And so again, this shared trauma, I suppose, and connection is what gave them some kind of a friendship over the years. So that was something I had heard before, and I was glad Vanessa mentioned it. I will say I do really admire Bertolucci as a filmmaker, and I really like a lot of his films. But sometimes you have to separate the person from the art, right? And you have to admit that at least, well, talking for myself, just from a lot of things that people have said about, I've argued with a lot of people about this issue, and there seems to be people defending Bertolucci a little too much, which, sometimes you have to separate the artist from the art. And to me, I have no problem in saying that Bertolucci clearly was totally in the wrong here. But for anyone interested in Maria Schneider, her as a person, insight into how she came to be in a film like Last Tango and The Passenger, how she got into film and television, why her career went the way it did, and of course the struggles that came after Last Tango in Paris, like her drug addiction. It's a really interesting memoir from the perspective of her cousin, and I highly recommend it. So if you haven't read it, Molly Ringwald did a great translation here. So if you haven't read it, I highly recommend getting yourself a copy. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I want to thank all of my members on Patreon. If you're interested in becoming a member of my Patreon, head over to the link patreon.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies for full details. You can also leave a donation directly to my YouTube channel by pressing the thanks link, which you will find directly below the video frame, right beside the like and dislike comment links. Just click the thanks link, and from there you can leave a donation if you choose to. And lastly, if this is your first time here, please consider subscribing by pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the Movies logo. You will see it floating above my head in the top left corner to your top left in just a second. It is absolutely free to do so. Just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new episodes. Click the like button and comment. Let me know if you've read this book. Let me know what you think of it. Or if you now are watching this review and go away and read the book, come back. Let me know what you think. Thank you so much, everyone, and I will see you in the next video.